There's actually a much larger transfer that almost no one has talked about, and it should be relevant to many of the people in this room. Intergenerational transfers. What's the transfer from young people to older people? And Gokhale estimated about $60 trillion transfer that is going on as we speak, from people who are very young to their elders. That includes me. I am the recipient of this. Huge amounts of money are being transferred, in effect, to me, people of my generational cohort, from very young people. And there's a reason for that. People who are 56 years old tend to vote, and people who are 7 years old don't. And I think that's despicable. It's grossly unfair that this is happening, that young people are being looted because they're going to be burdened with so much debt it cannot be paid. But the reason is they don't vote. And even people at 18, 19, 20 years old don't vote in large numbers, even those who understood what's at stake. But people who are 60 years old do tend to vote, and many of them have a better understanding of what's going on. This, to me, it really shames me that this is happening, that we are stealing from, in effect, from children to finance current consumption. So there are a lot more countries that face a Greek future than understand it. And if we think, well, conservatives can get into power and fix this, actually the European conservatives are partly to blame for this. The New Democracy Party, which is the conservative center-right party in Greece, in their 5 years in government, added 100,000 new employees to the government payroll. It's in a small country. They just hired all their cousins. And once you're a Greek civil servant, it's a lifetime job. And increased government spending from 42% to 51% of GDP in 5 short years. So the socialists made a mess, and then the conservatives made it worse. This may sound familiar from the American context, where we've had the Bush administration's compassionate conservatism and so on, adding tremendously to this burden. Well, what's the consequence? Rioting in Greece, the emergence of extremist political parties. Does this look familiar to anybody? Bring any bills? Does it look like to you? It's, of course, a traditional Greek design from a Corinthian column, right? Well, yes, exactly. It's a swastika. Everybody knows this. That's what it's for. This is the Golden Dawn Party. The Golden Dawn Party now has representation in the Greek Parliament, where they stand and give their fascist salutes to the Parliament. They assault and attack people of color, dark-skinned people, Asian people, Arabs, blaming them for the problems of Greece as their welfare state has melted down, cannot pay all of the promises that have been made to people. And so these fascist parties emerge. This is true in Hungary, in the Jobbik party. Now has 45 members of parliament. It has officially come out of the closet as a National Socialist Party. Márton György in the Hungarian parliament in December gave a speech calling on the government to release a list of all the Jews holding government positions as national security risks and enemies of the nation.
In Hungary?
This is in Hungary,
Oh my God.
where in 1944, 500,000 Jews were exterminated by the predecessors of the Jobbik party. It was called the Arrow Cross Party. So this tends to bring with it, when these systems collapse in this fashion, really frightening, scary forms of political extremism. The Syriza party in Greece is a truly communist party. They're very frightening, extremist Stalinists, and then Hitlerites, if you will, from the Golden Dawn party. And this should really focus our attention, particularly anyone who knows much 20th century European history. The fact is that those entitlements are not going to be paid. There's going to be default. Take one form or another. They talk about a haircut. Bondholders will get a haircut. That is a partial default. That just means we're going to pay back 80% or 60% of whatever of what we owe you. It's a default on 40% if there's a 60% payback rate. There's going to be default on promises. Promises that are currently made will not be fulfilled. There's not enough money in the piggy bank, or there will be enough money in the piggy bank and you'll get a worse kind of default, which is through inflation. You print the money. That is an especially destructive and cruel form of default. You receive the nominal payment that was promised, but it won't buy a loaf of bread. And that system is actually much more disturbing.
Is that what we have now? Like they print money and there's,
It's what we may be heading toward after QE19.
oh, because somebody said,
What
I
do we-
heard something that.
We'll have a Q&A.
Why don't we discuss it later?
Oh, sure.
So I think it's time to ask, what are some of the alternatives? And I want to run very quickly through some alternatives about how these things were provided before the welfare state. It was not the case that prior to the welfare state, people just died, or no one took care of anyone. We might look to those institutions and say, how did they function? What lessons might we learn for the period after the welfare state, as welfare states recede because of their fiscal imbalances, inability to pay. And the first is old-fashioned self-help, wealth production. The greatest poverty eradication program in the history of humanity has taken place in just the last 200 and something years. You look, Angus Madison charted per capita income around the world from year 1 to the present, pretty flat. Little increases in the high Middle Ages in China and in Europe. It collapses in the general crisis of the 17th century due to systematic wars in Asia and Europe. Recovers in about 1800, something amazing happens. Just an astonishing change in the fortunes of human beings. Later, in other places, but every place, huge increase in well-being, longevity, every measurement of human well-being. Actually bringing about more economic growth is one way to begin to solve these problems and ask what are the obstacles to economic growth and wealth creation. But there are other ways. It's not all just about production and exchange. There are other ways that people help to solve problems. Mutual aid and friendly societies. 2 examples. If you go to Europe, you see this Raiffeisenbank everywhere. It started out as a working class savings club. People would go to a pub after they got their wages. You might buy a beer. And the pub keeper would say, do you have money to set aside? And it would go into a box with your name behind the bar. It would be saved, sent to the bank every week, and you had a bank account. So it was a way for people of modest means to save and accumulate capital. And then friendly societies. This is for the ancient Sovereign and Grand Lodge and the Independent Order of Odd Fellows. Puzzling name. Never understood why they called them that. But these were once all over, these friendly societies. I want to look a little bit about how they work. They're almost all gone, but we have little hints of them in popular culture. And I'll give you some images that are now part of universal human culture. Here we are. This is Betty and Wilma and Fred and Barney of the Flintstones. And we can ask, does anyone know where they are? What they're doing? Sorry?
They're at the lodge.
They're at the lodge. What is the lodge? The Water Buffalo
Freemasons
Lodge.
or something?
What do they do at the Water Buffalo Lodge?
Freemasons or?
Well, no, they're not Masons. Although Masons also have lodges. Well, let me then ask this question. The people in this room, how many of your parents go to the lodge? Okay. My parents went to the lodge. Very important part of their lives. Many people used to go to the lodge. There are places where people went to be with their friends and to socialize and to take care of each other. Very, very important institutions called friendly societies. Elks, the Water Buffalo, the Masons, the Knights of Columbus for Roman Catholics and so on. Huge numbers of these organizations, and they were at one time everywhere. They had all sorts of benefits. They were made up of humble working class people. These were not associations only for the rich and the powerful. These for stonemasons and workers and factory workers and so on, who provided burial benefits. If you died, someone would be sure you were going to be buried with dignity and honor. Sickness benefits. People would come and visit you if you were ill. You had the right to receive medicines. They produced hospitals. They built hospitals all over the world. And they took care of each other and provided all these different institutions mutual aid. This was the modern woodmen of America, NWA, these puzzling axes they used to carry around. And it was a very important friendly society. It was transformed into a commercial insurance company. It still exists, Modern Woodmen Insurance, based in Omaha, Nebraska. Some of them became insurance companies. Most of the rest just dwindled. Old people were left, and then eventually no one. If you go to the lodges, even the Masons, if I were to walk in, I would very likely be the youngest person there. These are groups of old people. They are dying out, and when they are gone, there will be no replacement for them. They used all kinds of mechanisms to generate solidarity among the members, symbols, uniforms, absurd and ridiculous hats, and so on, emblems. These might not work today. I could not imagine appearing in public like that. But they were very popular at the time, and they were actually targeted for destruction by the welfare state, most notably in the United Kingdom and then elsewhere. In the U.S., in the 1920s, about 1/3 of adults were members of these associations. There's a huge variety of them. Some of them catered for ethnic groups. There were groups for people who spoke Chinese. They were people who came to America speaking Chinese, finding it sometimes a bit difficult to navigate the different social systems. But they had a well-developed system in their own community, and they drew on that. In Washington, D.C., there's a building called the Oba Building. No one knows what it means. I'm one of the only living people who knows. So it's the Oba Building. And I ask you, what does Oba mean? I don't know. It's the Oriental Building Association. It was for Chinese people who wanted to get mortgages and bank loans, and because they didn't have the credit histories that were legible to English-speaking Americans, they found difficulty, but they knew their own community, and they were able to pool their savings and provide them. In the United Kingdom, they grew quite rapidly. David Green has a very good book, which actually I commissioned years ago. You can download the whole book if you're interested in this, and it's excerpted in this little green book also. We've got some of the key elements of it. They looked at the rapid growth of these organizations in terms of members, both registered and unregistered societies. And they began to peak in 1911. What happens in 1911? The National Health Act is passed. This was an attack on their friendly society. They opposed it strongly. They said, we don't need this socialism, statism. They provided their own medical care. They built hospitals, medical institutes, provided benefits to their members. And what happened was a compulsory state system was introduced. So on the one hand, as a member of the Oddfellows Lodge, I pay dues every month, so much money, in exchange for which I have the right to receive benefits. The state comes along and taxes me and says, in exchange for the tax, we offer you the same benefits. Now what do I do? What's rational for me? I pay a voluntary fee to receive a basket of benefits, and the same benefits, I also pay a mandatory tax. I stop paying the voluntary fee. Because I can't say, oh, Mr. Taxman, I've chosen not to pay. The taxman will come and have a robust discussion and hold me off to prison. But I can say, well, I'm going to not be a member of the Friendly Society anymore. And this is exactly what happened. Friendly Society membership begins to dwindle, especially in the 1920s, goes down. 1948, the healthcare system is nationalized. They create the NHS. And they say, we are responsible for taking care of the health of the British people. But if you go to the hospitals and look at the cornerstones, when they were built and by whom, they were not built by the state. They were built by friendly societies, by churches, by other organizations, and then nationalized by the state.